is to introduce Donald Cronson. Donald Cronson, here immediately before me, is the most distant traveler in the room this evening, came from Switzerland to be part of this round table and this event, and he was Justice Jackson's law clerk during the 1952-53 year. Donald Cronson, in his military service, had ended up in the Pacific Theater working on what he very modestly calls the low-level war criminals of the defeated Japanese. And through his education and perhaps through that work, had fastened on Robert Jackson as the one justice on the Supreme Court who Donald was interested in being a law clerk for. And so he applied for that position. And he wasn't selected because Jackson didn't always hire. Jackson had a style of hiring somebody and letting them work, and if it worked out and they wanted to stay and so forth, a first year could become a second year and so forth. And so Donald Cronson, dreaming and aiming at this job, basically applied to something that wasn't a vacancy. And so he went into law practice, first in the private sector, then as a federal prosecutor in Chicago, connected with the Department of Justice and so forth. But never obviously lost his focus on Jackson or his interest in Jackson as an employer, as a mentor, as a great legal talent. It's interesting, and I haven't even told him this. I want to hold back a tidbit or two. Don Cronson remembers applying a second time. I think he applied 3 times, based on the archival work I've done. And the way he applied grew increasingly charming. And I think it can't help but be part of what eventually grabbed Justice Jackson. The last time, the successful time that Cronson wrote to Jackson, he began his letter as follows: "Dear Justice Jackson, here it is, my annual application letter." Robert Jackson grew to know and like, admire, and value greatly the assistance of Donald Cronson. And I think in an interesting way that in addition to that chemistry, that personal connection, and the work of that year, a very interesting path that I see in Don Cronson's life emanates from and connects to Jackson. Jackson was so much bigger than the United States by 1952 and 1953. And the law is so much bigger than the United States. Jackson, through his Nuremberg work, had become the celebrated leading attorney of the Allies and the Western world, and really the globe. By the late 1940s, that was the audience he spoke to. That was the work he considered the most important in his life. That was the writing and teaching he continued to do until his death. And Don Cronson, in his own work, perhaps consciously, perhaps just the way one's career evolves, literally has traveled that path. Our planet is a very small place. Part of what Nuremberg tried to do was stitch it back together after its most fundamental fracture in the 20th century. Part of what the legal profession tries to do is stitch life, relationships, the world back together. And Don Cronson, in his work, has literally, geographically, personally, professionally, been part of a broad reach, a great distance, and a stitching together process that I see as a part of the Jackson legacy that is really at its center. Donald Cronson, it's really an honor that you've been with us for this event.